There's all sorts of things moving in the NBA right now. Possible Cavaliers trade. We'll get into all that as the show goes on. But I want to start my show. I'm going to be a little bit of a jerk this morning. So Jordan Spieth, as many of you have probably seen, wins the Travelers Championship with a superb chip out of the sand, and all the crowds put down their tea and clapped louder than the loudest violin during an orchestra. And after he wins, people go crazy, and it was an amazing shot, and it was something you could see Tiger Woods doing. But folks, what overshadowed this whole thing for me, as I'm getting texts last night about the shot, as I'm doing my research about this whole thing, as I'm reading an ESPN article by Jason Sobel about what this means for golf and what this means for the Travelers Championship. Mid-article, there's a picture of Jordan Spieth wearing his perfectly white Under Armour hat, surrounded by old, pretentious-looking white guys, an old, pretentious-looking white woman. They're all raising their hands and air clapping for the nice young boy. He deserved it. What an egoless chap. No fist pumping, no swearing, just perfectly shaved. Just the type of golf champion I can get behind. And it just hit me. Jordan Spieth is the Ken Barbie doll of golf. And he represents everything that America isn't. He's too clean. He's too well-spoken. He doesn't look like he can grow a beard. He looks like a guy. Doesn't Jordan Spieth to you look like a guy that would hear rap music and say, "Oh, what is this garbage? Turn this off. What is this?" That's what Jordan Spieth looks like to me. He's the least relatable, dominant athlete in America. And folks, it ain't about race. If it was about race, golf would be getting ratings out the wazoo because America is 76% white. It ain't about race. This is about the optics on Jordan Spieth and golf and its elitism. I look at Jordan Spieth, who comes from an upper-class family of athletes, whose girlfriend looks like every other Stacy from the Beta Phi sorority house who just wants a man with a company credit card. And I say to myself, this guy sucks. This guy's unattainable. This guy's not relatable. This guy's too generic, too elite. He represents the 10% in our country that holds 76% of the wealth. And it ain't his fault. Jordan Spieth is probably a great guy, and the people close to him probably would hate me for saying all this. But you know what? I think I represent the majority of Americans whose attention was brought to golf yesterday because of one great shot, and who said to themselves, man, look at this guy. Looks like Chet from the fraternity house. Probably eats mayonnaise sandwiches. Probably shudders at the thought of wearing an off-brand button-down. But, with that being said, it ain't all bad for golf. Jordan Spieth and the elitism that he represents actually, in my opinion, are a perfect setup for a Robin Hood situation to arise in golf. All golf needs now is a John Daly type figure. They don't have to be black. They don't have to be broke. They don't have to be a social justice warrior. Hell, they don't even have to be an American minority. But they need to be a hell of a golfer, and they need to be imperfect, and they need to have some sort of an edge. They need to represent screw the man. They need to be relatable to the common man in America or common woman in America that shows up to their kitchen shift or sales position and doesn't love their life, got bad teeth, doesn't have an extremely attractive partner to go home to, just the average man or woman in America. If golf wants those Tiger Woods ratings back, and boy are they down since he left, if they want to appeal to the majority of America, which is the 90% of the population sharing 24% of the wealth that's left for them. We need a Robin Hood to challenge the elite. We need somebody who's not scripted, who's not well-spoken. We need somebody that's going to rip into somebody, go after a fan, tell him to get the hell out of the way. Just like Jerry, the local carpenter, would flip you off for going 60 in the passing lane. That's what we need in golf. Again, this isn't a personal attack on Jordan Spieth, but optics in America become reality in the media age we live in. And the optics on Spieth are relatable for only about 10% of the American population. When I saw that picture of Spieth surrounded by those pompous white men, I was thinking what you were thinking. Look at this guy. Look at this frat house. Look at him. Quiet, well-spoken, great family, no dysfunction, dating socialite Stacy from Beta Phi sorority house. Looks like he would find gangster rap distasteful and offensive. Golf needs a Robin Hood to challenge Spieth as the best golfer in the world. And if they find that Robin Hood, this show, The Jerk, could be talking golf more than 3 times a year. Golf will start to refine those Tiger Woods ratings. Golf needs a Robin Hood because all Jordan Spieth represents to the common man is the American elite. Besides all that, though, it was a fantastic shot to win a tournament that is largely dying. And moments like this, walk-off shots in golf, they just don't happen very often. Here's the sound. Here's what it sounded like.
He's made it again, just as he did at the John Deere for his first win. Unbelievable.
Jim Nantz on the call. There it is, folks. That is Jordan Spieth, considered by many to be the best golfer in America today. Looks like a Ken Barbie doll. Looks like he can't shave his face or has no reason to shave his face. Looks like he'd be offended by gangster rap. The least relatable, dominant sports figure in our country. And he's representing golf right now. All right, after the break, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin opting out of the Clippers. This reminds me of something that happened growing up that I had to witness. We'll be back after the break. 107.1 KLJXLP Flagstaff, Arizona. Facebook Live, KJACKradio.com. I'm Matthew Jarecki. This is The Jerk. Welcome back to The Jerk. I'm Matthew Jarecki. I am The Jerk. Great show today. Jordan Spieth won the Travelers Championship yesterday with a chip-in, and everybody was all excited about it. Everybody was texting me. I was at work. Everybody's texting me, telling me how great of a shot it was. Jordan Spieth is awesome. Blah, 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 blah. I go and read an article about it, and I see Jordan Spieth looks like he looks like the Ken Barbie doll. All right, and he's surrounded by these pompous-looking white folks, rich white folks, and I realized, I was thinking what the rest of America was thinking. Look at this guy. He looks like Chet from the fraternity house. He looks like Chet just graduated from Dartmouth College and stepped onto the golf course and won a championship. Who can relate to that in America? It's not the general public. It's the 10% of America that holds like 76% of the wealth. So I think golf, ratings are down big time. Since Tiger left golf, ratings are down big time. And I don't think Jordan Spieth is helping those ratings at all. Having an elite white man win golf championships, that's golf. We want something different. We need somebody to represent the common man who's going to flip you off for going 60 in the passing lane. That's what we need in golf. We need a Robin Hood to come in, represent the general public, and challenge Jordan Spieth as the elite in America. We need Robin Hood to represent the common man in America, challenging the elite. But in other news, Chris Paul. So on this Saturday, free agency begins in the NBA, and it's exciting. We don't have the huge, big, marquee free agents that we've had in past years. But what we do have, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are going to opt out of their contracts for the Los Angeles Clippers. This move to me is something that's needed to happen for quite a while. This whole Chris Paul, Blake Griffin opting out thing, it reminds me of something I had to do when I used to work at a goat farm, and it's absolutely necessary, and every team needs to do this every once in a while, and everybody that's ever hunted animals needs to do this every once in a while. Everybody that's had a farm, which I know is not a lot of people, has had to do this every once in a while. But when I used to work at a goat farm, we had, 32 goats, and one of them would get sick, and they'd just be living in misery. So you got to take them out back and shoot them. That's what you got to do. When an animal is suffering, it's considered humane. Just put them out of there. If you wound a deer, and you're a hunter, you do everything you can to find that deer and go kill it, because you don't want that animal struggling for like a week straight or however long he's going to live, and he struggles and he gets diseases in the open wound, and then all of a sudden a coyote comes along and eats it. What you want to do is find that deer and put it out of its misery right away. It's considered humane. And I think Chris Paul and Blake Griffin opting out of their contracts for the Los Angeles Clippers, it simply puts this team out of its misery. You just got Jerry West in there, right? Let Jerry West build that thing from the ground up. Get those contracts out of there. Now, a lot of people would say, well, yeah, this is a power move. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, they don't want DeAndre Jordan there anymore. He's a center that's going to make more than he's worth on his next contract. He can't defend the outside. He can't shoot a three. DeAndre Jordan is largely, in today's NBA, he's outdated. He's useless. But what I would say, this Clippers team, if you keep Blake Griffin, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Jordan together, it's just like a wounded animal suffering through a disease. That's what this Clippers team is. They're just good enough to make the playoffs every single year. They're just bad enough, they're never going to get past the first round of the playoffs. What the Clippers need to do, look, Blake Griffin needs to leave that team, because Blake Griffin is a guy whose game is predicated on jumping out of the gym, much like Russell Westbrook, and Blake Griffin is now injury prone. He doesn't have the same jump he used to have. Get him out of there. Chris Paul, he's going to be like 34 heading into, maybe 35 heading into next season. I got to look that up. He's an old point guard, and this league tells us point guards do not age well. You got to get Chris Paul out of there. His contract's too big. 2 years down the line, he's going to be largely a washed-up point guard. We saw Darren Williams in the playoffs this year. It doesn't end well for these point guards, especially the undersized ones. Chris Paul has about two more good years left, and if he's on the Clippers, they're going to be wasted. DeAndre Jordan, I just went into that. That's their big three. Get Jerry West in there. Take away roster rights from Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has proven to us, very few people in professional sports can do two things. Very few people can coach a team and also be the general manager of a team. It takes an all-time great. Even Bill Belichick gives up roster control to people he really trusts. Even Andy Reid has needed really, really good GMs. Even Pete Carroll has needed John Schneider, one of the best GMs in the NFL. Very few people in the NBA Greg Popovich is one of them, can have roster control and coach a team to championships. Doc Rivers has now proven to us he can't do that. What the Clippers need to do now, and I think they're starting to do it, I think this is the beginning of it, with, Chris Paul and Blake Griffin opting out, the Clippers just need to kill the wounded animal and let Jerry West, the proven team builder who's coming over from Golden State, they need to let Jerry West, who's still got a lot of competitive drive and fight in him, they need to let Jerry West build this thing from the ground up, and I think Steve Ballmer knows that. Steve Ballmer, the owner for the Los Angeles Clippers, I think he knows that. And I think, Blake Griffin can go somewhere. In my opinion, Blake Griffin at this point in his career, he can go somewhere and contribute. He is not your go-to star anymore. Chris Paul, he goes to the Rockets. That's a real team in the West. Hell yeah, it is. James Harden, Chris Paul. We don't know what the Rockets need to give up yet. They're looking at letting Lou Williams and Patrick Beverly walk. But the shooters over there for Houston, something that Chris Paul hasn't had in his career, that's a real team. You add Blake Griffin to a playoff-bound team, he can make a contribution. I don't think DeAndre Jordan, I had my buddy Lance Hartzler on the show last week telling me DeAndre Jordan's going to require $23 million a year. And I'm thinking to myself, why would any team pay for a rim protector that's not very athletic anymore, that can't guard the outside, and that can't hit a jump shot? That's literally not worth $15 million in the NBA. But DeAndre Jordan has that star brand. So I think, for the Clippers right now, who have been one of the saddest franchises in the NBA, they had a shot. It's over. They're like a wounded animal walking in the woods right now. Just put them out of their misery. Get that big three out of there. Clear up space and let Jerry West do his work. And I think this is the start of it. I really do. All right, after the break, Phil Jackson, his current tenure in New York, it's obviously, nobody can really explain it. One of the best coaches of all time in the NBA goes to New York, and he's just been horrible. Just horrible. And I think there's something interesting about it, but it's not necessarily the moves that Phil Jackson is making right now. I think there's something else very interesting about Phil Jackson's tenure in New York. And we'll get to that after the break. I'm Matthew Jarecki. This is The Jerk. The Monday morning, 9:30. We're on KLJX LP Flagstaff, Arizona 107.1 and Facebook Live and KJACKradio.com. You can catch the podcast after the show on any of my social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Generally, you can type in The Jerk with Matthew Jarecki and you'll find it. You can Google that and you'll find it. But if you want to catch us on Twitter, it's at The Jerk Show. And on Facebook, it's just the page, The Jerk with Matthew Jarecki. We always try to post the podcast after the show unless something happens. Unless I mess something up. There is some news right now that I wanted to keep you guys informed on. So the Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously, they were just outmatched in the NBA Finals. And LeBron James, one of the smartest players in the NBA, and a guy that's a big game hunter, he doesn't really mess around with not winning NBA titles. So LeBron James knows. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they really weren't close. It took a historic offensive performance to win one game at home against the Golden State Warriors. So, in the offseason, as they should be, the Cavs are going hard after a guy named Paul George, who has been tucked away in Indiana for his entire career, had a couple of good runs with the Indiana Pacers going to Eastern Conference championships, but never got past LeBron James and the Miami Heat. And he had a big leg injury, and people kind of forgot about Paul George. Paul George, though, is a top 5 player in the NBA on a good night. Generally, if you ask NBA experts, they'll tell you top 10, top 8, top 5. That's the kind of player Paul George is, and he's long, and he's elite defensively and offensively. He's a star. He's a real star in the NBA. And the Cavs are now talking about a three-way trade involving Paul George and Kevin Love. It looks like to me, we also have some Carmelo Anthony news, but it looks like to me Kevin Love could be heading to the Nuggets, the Denver Nuggets, and the Nuggets would give some young assets to Indiana, and the Nuggets are a good offensive team. Kevin Love might make them a playoff team. And the Nuggets would give young assets to Indiana, and Paul George would ultimately end up with the Cavs on a one-year deal. He would play out the rest of his deal that he has right now for Indiana with the Cavs. And I think Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, who looks like, the other news is Carmelo Anthony, if he can arrange it with the New York Knicks, a buyout from the New York Knicks, and Phil Jackson has historically been a guy that basically, he doesn't even like Carmelo Anthony as a person. They've had a very strenuous relationship. If the Cavs get Carmelo Anthony, a spot-up shooter, a guy they needed desperately in these NBA Finals, if they get Paul George, a guy that has the length to defend Kevin Durant so LeBron James doesn't have to worry about that, now, I believe, with a few bench players, this Cavaliers team can really compete for an NBA title against the Golden State Warriors next year. As it stands right now, this Cleveland team right now, if they don't get Paul George, I'm basically operating from the standpoint of this Cleveland team as it sits without Paul George does not have a chance in next year's NBA Finals. With LeBron a year older and an old bench, they have no chance right now. But I think if they add Paul George and if they add Carmelo Anthony, a spot-up shooter, they do have a real shot. That gives them the real offense they needed. Carmelo Anthony has been, I wouldn't even count this last year with the New York Knicks. He is older, but that relationship with Phil Jackson has been atrocious. And speaking of Phil Jackson, I want to get into this thing. So, Phil Jackson, everybody knows. I haven't discussed it much on this show. We obviously heard last week Phil Jackson was shopping around his best player and his youngest, best asset, Kristaps Porzingis. He was shopping him last week. We don't know if it's serious. We don't know if he was trying to teach Kristaps Porzingis a lesson, but he was shopping it. He was shopping Kristaps, and he leaked it to the media, and he talked openly about it to the media. And a lot of people are saying, Phil Jackson's going crazy. What the hell is Phil Jackson doing? And a lot of people can't understand it. I really can't understand it either, but I choose not to talk about it on this show because if you as an average sports fan can infer that something is happening, I don't think it's interesting anymore. I think it's obvious. It's obvious that Phil Jackson's doing a horrible job for the New York Knicks. So I don't talk about it much on this show. But I was thinking about it over the weekend. I don't think it's Phil Jackson's current tenure that you need to worry about. It's the residual effect that his tenure will have on that franchise that should scare you as a Knicks fan. Have you guys ever heard of the website Glassdoor? Glassdoor is a website. You can go on and you can see how previous employees ranked their past employer. So if you're thinking about getting a job at Denny's, the local Denny's, you can go to glassdoor.com and you can see, how's the management? How are the cooks? How do you get treated? How's the pay? You can see all that, and you don't have to go experience 6 months of horrible work environment to figure that out for yourself. Or, if it's a great work environment, you can say, wow, I really want this job. Phil Jackson is the glass door of NBA GMs or of NBA presidents. He is letting you know this is what you're going to get coming to the New York Knicks. First of all, in Phil Jackson's tenure, there will be no key free agents going to New York based on how he's treated Carmelo Anthony, a guy that players like around the league, based on how he just treated his best player, Kristaps Porzingis. So we already know There is no shot of getting an NBA star during Phil Jackson's tenure just based on how he's treated his current players. But after Phil Jackson's gone, after James Dolan, New York Knicks owner, finally lets Phil Jackson go, for the next 5 to 10 years, that reputation will linger. You basically, after the last 3 years of how Phil Jackson's treated Carmelo Anthony, after this year with Kristaps Porzingis, it is created for the next 5 to 10 years a landscape for the New York Knicks that no NBA star wants to touch. It is the Glassdoor website of the NBA. They all know. You know, these NBA stars, they're starting to figure this thing out. They really know they control the league. You don't win championships without an NBA star, and we're going to get into that in the next segment, talking about Danny Ainge. You don't win NBA championships without a star. Therefore, the stars in the NBA have more leverage than any other sport in America. No key free agent is going to come to an organization that has outwardly said about their best player, Carmelo Anthony, we don't want you here. We don't think you're conducive to us winning. Phil Jackson, the way he's treated Carmelo Anthony is unprecedented in the NBA, or in any sports league, really. We just don't see this. And James Dolan just keeps him around. So I think, right now, it's a given. Phil Jackson's been horrible. But for the next 5 to 10 years, you're screwed, Knicks fans. You're screwed. You can't get a free agent in there. Nobody wants to, if an NBA star chooses the Knicks right now, or for the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to be laughed at. James Dolan has a reputation, true or not, he has a reputation as, he's kind of a bigot. He might be racist. He had a big problem with Charles Oakley. Players with a lot of influence around the league, LeBron James and Chris Paul, they had a real problem with that Charles Oakley situation. I thought that situation was ridiculous. I thought it got way too much news coverage. But it had real effects. This Phil Jackson thing, the way he's treating his two best players, it's going to have residual effects 5 to 10 years down the line when the Knicks are trying to get stars. And by the way, the next big star, let's say this guy, this point guard out of France that the New York Knicks just drafted, let's say he turns into a star. You think he's going to want to stay with the Knicks when he hits his free agency? I don't think so. You think Kristaps Porzingis, when he becomes a free agent, is going to re-sign with the Knicks? Hell no. Phil Jackson has set this franchise back 5 to 10 years. Even when he's gone, they're going to feel the weight of his decisions. All right, after the break, Danny Ainge, up to this point, has actually done a really good job for the Boston Celtics. But there was one simple move in the NBA on draft night that made Danny Ainge look stubborn and that made Danny Ainge's moves look largely irrelevant up to this point. Be back after the break. I'm Matthew Jarecki. This is The Jerk. Welcome back to The Jerk. I'm Matthew Jarecki. I am The Jerk. It's 9:50 right now, Pacific time. We are broadcasting on 107.1 FM, Flagstaff, Arizona. So I was talking before the break, Phil Jackson, he's kind of making a fool out of himself. And I think right now, to talk about that is kind of boring because everybody knows Phil Jackson's doing a terrible job in New York. So I don't think that makes interesting radio. What I think is interesting is for 5 to 10 years down the line, every star in the NBA, because Phil Jackson's been very transparent. He's been all up in the media. For 5 to 10 years down the line, you know that site Glassdoor, where you can go and look and see what employees have said about the management at the company you're applying for? Phil Jackson is the glass door of the NBA. Everybody can look and see how that organization is run. And it's run very poorly, and it's run by one of the poorest NBA owners of all time. Like pro sports organizations generally trickle down, owner down. It's like, how good is the owner? Then, how good is the GM? Then, how good is the coach? And then, how good is the players? And how good the players are is generally predicated, how good is your management? How good is your coach? What's your scouting department like? And it all trickles down from the owner. And James Dolan, just by not firing Phil Jackson, tells every NBA star in the league, don't come here. And they're all going to listen to him. For the next 5 to 10 years, I don't see any big free agent heading to the New York Knicks. But I was thinking about this over the weekend. So the Boston Celtics have chosen to build kind of the Spurs way, right? They got the coach. They have the great culture. They have a patient fan base. You know, Boston's fan base is very, very patient. Because they know when the NFL season comes around, they're going to be competing for championships. They know every 3 to 4 years in baseball, they're going to be competing for championships. In hockey, same thing. And they love their hockey in Boston. So Boston's a very patient fan base. Everything's going pretty smoothly for the Celtics. I mean, they were in the Eastern Conference Championship Finals, and they're rebuilding. That's pretty successful, if you ask me. So everything seemed to be going great for Danny Ainge and the Boston Celtics and their Spurs rebuild until Minnesota made one bold move for a star and shot past them in one night, the night of the draft. They shot past the Boston Celtics, who are on like a 5-year rebuild right now. Minnesota shot past the Celtics with one bold move. You know what this Boston-Minnesota thing reminds me of, actually? And I've been in this situation very recently. It's summertime. It's like 95 degrees. I live on the top floor of my apartment complex. It is just miserable up there. But you want to be frugal, and you're refusing to spend the $300 on an AC unit. I mean, you got the money, but you just can't let it go. So you tough it out, and you think you're being frugal, but you can't get any work done in the house, and your girlfriend's pissed off at you, and your dog hates you, but you saved that $300, right? Danny Ainge, you're saving those draft picks, right? Then you walk into your neighbor's house. That AC unit you've been eyeing is all hooked up and blasting in his house. And it's like heaven in there. And all you want to do is hang out in there all day, and your girlfriend gives you that look. Honey. All of a sudden, $300 doesn't seem like that much. All of a sudden, that plan you had to keep your freezer open and put a box fan in the window, it looks silly. And you're on your way to Sam's Club to pick that puppy up because it's just worth it. You're going to be more productive in the summertime. You're going to be happier. And you're going to have that thing for the next 5 years until it poops out. So you go get the AC unit. Except Danny Ainge just won't get that AC unit. It's 95 degrees. He lives on the top floor. All he needs to be, he's got a good job. He does a lot of work at home. All he needs to do to be a productive, happy person in the summer is get that AC unit, and he won't get it. Danny Ainge on draft night. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the Boston Celtics surely were looking for a trade for Jimmy Butler, one of the up-and-coming stars in the NBA that plays real offense and real defense, taught by Tom Thibodeau. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have been on like a 4-year rebuild compared to Boston's like 5-year rebuild, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have a young Andrew Wiggins that doesn't defend, and have, in my opinion, the best big man in the league, Karl Anthony Towns, all they needed to do was trade their 7th pick in the NBA draft and a couple players, Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine, that weren't going to start for them anyway. That's all they needed to do to get that AC unit, Jimmy Butler, and to be happy for the next 3 years while they compete for NBA championships. And they will. It might not be this year. They'll be in the playoffs this year, though. They're going to be a better team than the Boston Celtics this year, though. All it took was the 7th pick in the NBA draft and two players over the next 5 years that will be largely irrelevant. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have one of the best coaches in the NBA, now bring in Jimmy Butler, an established veteran. What do we know? What's a given in the NBA? You need established veteran all-stars to compete for championships. Golden State had Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. They didn't start competing for championships until they were developed 4 years into the league, all-stars. That's what Jimmy Butler brings. You know, the Boston Celtics, you can have as many B's and B pluses, which I think Isaiah Thomas is a B plus, 5'9" point guard that had an A plus season. You can have as many B's as you want, generally in the NBA. Think about the Cavs roster. The Cavs roster is LeBron James A plus, Kyrie Irving A, Kevin Love, who plays like a B plus for the Cavaliers, even though he's probably more like an A on any other team. And then a bunch of C's and D's. Like Cleveland's bench is largely D players, C players that are getting old. And Boston, with a roster full of like 5 or 6 B to B plus players, they won one game. That series wasn't competitive. A lot of times in the NBA, if you have 1 or 2 A's, that's going to beat out 5, 6, 7 B's. And Minnesota, all they needed to give up was the 7th pick in the draft, and Boston has 2 first-rounders next year, and you don't think Boston could have matched that? And you don't think Boston would go 7 games if they get Jimmy Butler, if they had an A player? But Minnesota got Jimmy Butler. Minnesota went out and spent the money, and they didn't spend much. They got a value for that thing. They got that thing half off. A draft pick and Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn for Jimmy Butler? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And now Jimmy Butler comes into that Minnesota organization, who didn't have to give up much to get him. He learned how to play defense under Tom Thibodeau, and he's going to show Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns and the rest of the young players on that young roster, hey guys, do you guys want to go compete for championships? Then let's listen to Tom. Let's play real defense like I play it, because Jimmy Butler's an established star that plays real defense, which is hard to find. James Harden and Russell Westbrook don't do that. He's going to say, hey guys, do you guys want to go deep in the playoffs? Do you guys want to compete with the Golden State Warriors in a series this year? Then let's listen to Tom and let's play real defense. And now you have 3 guys, by the way, Jimmy Butler, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, that can all go over 25 points. The Minnesota Timberwolves with one of the best coaches in the NBA, and now 2.5 A players. Karl Anthony Towns and Jimmy Butler are A's, and Andrew Wiggins is kind of like a B plus that could develop into an A. They're sitting in a better position than 95% of the teams in the NBA. They could develop into the 3rd best team in the NBA. All right, it was a great show today. Jordan Spieth is just white bread, Wonder Bread, margarine. He's the elite. He is the elite of the elite. He looks like Ken the Barbie doll. He's dating Stacy the socialite from Beta Phi sorority house. He represents the 10% of Americans that hold 76% of the wealth. Golf needs a Robin Hood to come in and challenge him. That was my main takeaway from his great shot yesterday. It was a great shot, but my main takeaway was, boy, oh boy, look at this guy. This guy sucks. The podcast will be up later today, the Jerk Podcast. It'll be up on all of my social media accounts, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, whatever. It'll be up on all those. Go to our Twitter feed at The Jerk Show. Go to my Facebook page, The Jerk with Matthew Jarecki. Go to my YouTube channel, The Jerk with Matthew Jarecki. It's all the same. Or you can go hit me up on Twitter. Just type in my name, Matthew Jarecki, Jarecki. Again, we are in here 9 to 10 a.m. every single weekday. It's the only sports radio show broadcasting right out of Flagstaff. The rest of the sports radio you get in Flagstaff, it's all the rest of the national guys that are just, broadcasted in. We will be back tomorrow for a great show. It's the NBA award ceremony tonight. It's also, there's this thing called the Big Three. It's Ice Cube's new basketball league. It takes older players, and they play 3-on-3 basketball. I'm actually going to check that thing out. So I think that thing's on Fox. I'm not sure which channel the NBA award ceremonies will be on, but Russell Westbrook's going to win the MVP tonight. It's a little bit anticlimactic, but it stretches out the NBA season, so I support it, and I'll talk about it tomorrow. All right, I'm Matthew Jarecki. This has been The Jerk.